Have you ever wondered why tape measures have this loose bit on the end that seems to move back and forward a little bit? The reason is so that if you're pushed up against something or if you're hooked over the end of it, you get the same measurement. So it moves, the amount that this moves is the same as the thickness of it. So approximately 1 millimeter, maybe it's ever so slightly more, but that's the travel distance you get on this. So that's how much it moves. So hooked over the end, you can see this bit of door lining is 12.9 millimeters, and then even if I butt up against another piece, we still get the same measurement, the same 12.9 millimeters on there. And the reason those measurements are the same is because this piece moves back and forth. Now you might have noticed that this tape measure I'm using is metric only, so it only shows millimeters and centimeters on it. It doesn't have an inches side, and this is really useful because often when you're working and you've got a tape measure on something, you see the tape measure is concave. It means that you don't actually have a side that's touching your workpiece ordinarily unless you tilt it, and so often you find that if you're using one that's metric and imperial, the side that you want to make your mark on, them usually the millimeter side, is often actually not the right side of the tape measure. So I always use this metric one, so much more useful. Whereas this Stanley one here is metric and imperial. And if you're pushed up against something, you want to make your mark, and actually the side that you want to make your mark on is actually ends up being the inches side, causes you a problem. And inches does not always go into millimeters in whole millimeters, so you're much better off just getting yourself a metric only one, and then you've always got the scale you want on both sides, so whenever you're making a mark, you've always got the place to make your mark correctly. You don't have to worry about flipping the tape measure over or making a guess at what the measurement is in inches rather than millimeters. So it's often difficult to find the midpoint of something when you've got an awkward number. So if you measure something and it's 39.2 centimeters, that's an awkward number to split in two and get your center point. There's a much easier way where you just take your tape measure and turn it to an angle where you've got a round number. So here, you can see this is 12.9 centimeters, this piece of wood. But actually if you want to get something that's going to easily divide in two to find the center, I can just go for 14. Just turn your tape measure so it's 14. Then I know that that's 7. That's exactly in the center of the piece of wood. So it's a really nice easy trick just for quick centers on things. And as long as both sides are parallel, this will always work. So just choose a measurement that's sensible for you and easy to divide into, and then it's a really easy center point. The next trick is 3, 4, 5 triangles, and basically that enables you to check something square just using a tape measure. For small stuff, it's usually easier to just use a square, but for anything bigger, you really want to be squaring up with the tape measure. So anything like a building or a room, anything remotely big. 3, 4, 5, you might remember from maths at school, is actually a Pythagorean triple, which means that 3 squared plus 4 squared equals 5 squared, which is your diagonal line. And you don't really need to worry about the maths of that, and it works with any unit, but basically if you've got 3 along one way, 4 upwards, you always have 5 here. If it's square, it'll always be exactly 5. Doesn't matter if you're in meters, centimeters, millimeters, inches, feet, whatever unit you like, 3, 4, 5 is always the same. So let's do a quick demo of how it works. On this builder square here, we can prove it. So we can see 4 inches here, 3 inches here. Now if I get a tape measure and measure the distance between these two, it will definitely be 5 inches because this is square. So you can see there, that's exactly 5 inches between the 4 and the 3. Now that was just on a very small scale, but it will work on any much bigger scale. So any units you like, we could have been doing meters or tens of meters. And it also works for any multiple of 3, 4, 5, and those are called Pythagorean triples. So anything that works in that 3, 4, 5, so you can have 30, 40, 50, or you can have 6, 8, 10, it all works, but it has to be 3, 4, 5, it has to be divisible by 3, 4, 5, because otherwise it doesn't work. So most people just tend to stick with 3, 4, 5, or units of 3, 4, 5, so if it's a building or something you're doing, just use meters. Now another good one is if you've got a wall or something that you're trying to measure and find the midpoint of that's actually longer than your tape measure, what you can do is stand approximately in the middle of it, and put your tape measure one way. And just make a mark on a round number or something that seems roughly in the middle, so I'm just going to choose 140 there. And then make the same measurement the other way. So 140 the other way is here. Now I've got my two marks on the floor here, and to find the midpoint, all I need to do is find the midpoint of these two. So they're 7 centimeters apart, so 3.5, and now I know that is my midpoint of this wall. Next one is these slots in the end of tape measures. Now this is actually really useful, this little hole here, because you can hook it over screws or nails. So if you're doing a long distance or working on your own or something, this really easily hooks over and you get a nice tight hook over a screw or a nail, rather than just relying on this little nib hanging over the end of a piece of wood, which when you're pulling out 8 meters or so is really easy for it to slip off, but when you're on a screw or a nail, they don't so easily slip off, so much easier if you're working on your own or if it's a really long measurement. You can also use the serration on the metal at the end of the tape measure to actually mark things. So especially if it's something that's a bit rough like plasterboard, you take your measure and then just use this to score your workpiece. So if I know I want to take, say, 10 centimeters of plasterboard, I can just clamp my finger there on the 10 centimeters and use this serrated edge to just draw. Not sure how easy this can be seen on camera, but I've got a little line going across here, just where I've dragged across using that serration. And then for something like this, you can easily just take your Stanley knife in there and snap this bit of plasterboard. Really easy. Now, final one is tape measures actually say the length of them. Generally is printed on it. Bit difficult to see on the camera, I think, but this is 3 1/8 inches long, and what it means is that if you're trying to do a measurement that's between two upright surfaces, rather than having to bend the tape measure into a corner like that and take a guess at where the number's landing, instead you can just pull it end to end like that, and then you need to add the length of the tape measure onto whatever your length you're measuring on here. Now this probably isn't a trick that you're going to use that regularly, to be honest, because I think once you've got a little bit of tape measure experience, you get pretty good, even when you're bending into the corner, just judging where the end is. So after a bit of experience with a tape measure, you quite quickly get good at judging where the end of the tape measure is going to fall. So actually, if that were flat down, how long the measurement is. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more.